Say thank you because it takes a village to do this research. And I would like to offer my gratitude to the Rebbecca Nurse Homestead and the Danvers Alarm List Company for hosting this event on behalf of the Essex County Trails and Sales. For Candace Dawes over here in the corner, and Catherine Rutkowski, who is not here tonight. She would have been, but she had a family situation come up, because they do so much here to keep the history of not only Rebecca's family, but the whole town family alive. And they get people excited about learning about the history and all of the, the whole Salem Witch Trial experience. So thank you. And I would like to thank historian Dr. Danny Buck, who lives in Great Yarmouth. And he made a special trip from his home to go take pictures of St. Nicholas Church for this presentation tonight. So thank you, Danny. And also new author of The Life of Sarah Cloyce, Antonio Stuckey, for sitting down with me and explaining how Sarah Cloyce was actually saved from being hanged. Thank you, Antonio. He is not here tonight. Historian and friend Margot Burns for spending more than 2 hours combing through the documents so that we could actually explain that midnight ride the night of Mary's second arrest. And she's also always willing to help me at a moment's notice. So I'm very grateful for her. And last but never least, Josh Hutchinson and Sarah Jack, who actually host the thing about Salem, the podcast, and also the thing about witch hunts podcast. And we have worked together, and they've worked with me tirelessly regarding both historical witch hunts and present day witch hunts. They are the best. So thank you very much for everybody. So let's get started. I've got some special things to show you first. So the first thing I'm going to show you is the newest photo of where the town family were all baptized except for Sarah and Joseph, who were baptized here in this country. But that's St. Nicholas Church. And another picture of St. Nicholas. Great Yarmouth. Great Yarmouth, England, yep. And then this is the plaque that's actually inside of St. Nicholas Church, honoring the town family. Do you know that, Candace? Sorry? The year that the plaque was put up at St. Nicholas? I can find that out. I'll be happy to find that out for you. Well, I'm going to go into that a little bit later in the presentation. That. And now here is William Town's baptismal record. That's actually in Great Yarmouth, or Norfolk, the Norfolk County Parish Registers. So as you can see where the red marks are, that was his baptismal record, 18th of March in 1588. And now the next one is going to be Rebecca's, where the red dot is, obviously. And then the next one is going to be John's. And then we have Susan. Very hard to read, but it can be made out if you really look at it. And then Edmund is next. And then we have Jacob. And then last but not least, for a little while, we have Mary. So though it's believed that William was an apprentice to a basket maker, his actual income was made by growing and selling flowers, where he and Joanna lived at Great Yarmouth. Great Yarmouth is known for its smoked herring, and the seaport merchant town grew around the harbor, where ships from across the coast and occasional foreign ports moored to unload their cargo. Streets were narrow and irregular, pressed between closely packed buildings. The central market square was the town's hub. Here, fishermen sold their daily catch amongst the clattering voices of the merchants. On a rise near the market stood the shell of a medieval castle, once the town's mighty fortress, which then served in William and Joanna's time as a jail. So, you know, the troublemakers, the thieves, and all that around that busy port. If William had built a house after his marriage, it was likely in a Dutch style, featuring a double-pitched gambrel roof that created extra living space beneath the eaves, and it was constructed of stone, brick, or flint, and centered around a large chimney, much like the way Rebecca's house is today. It is most likely that the family left Great Yarmouth sometime between April of 1635, when John was recorded as an apprentice, and September of that same year, when the family was notably absent from church service. Why did he leave? William was likely watching events in Parliament very closely when Charles I, who is described by one of our favorite historians, Emerson Baker, as a crypto-Catholic, appointed fierce enforcer William Laud as Archbishop of Canterbury in 1633. For men like William Town, who sought to purify the church from within and freely practice their faith as they believed it led to their salvation, this was not a welcome development. So Archbishop Laud had no intention for allowing such freedom. So we don't know exactly why William and Joanna left, but I can only assume that that had a major part of their decision to leave due to feeling oppressed by what was going on with Parliament and the Archbishop and everything. Upon their arrival here in New England, the towns ended up at the northeastern part of Salem town, which is today Danvers Port in Danvers. And their first house would have probably been an English wigwam, which did not protect well from the outside elements, though there was a fireplace made of wood, of all things. Yeah. In late August of 1635, the sky darkened with a violence few in New England had ever witnessed. Winds roared from the sea, tearing roofs from the houses and splintering trees as though the trees were kindling. The tide surged higher and higher, swallowing the low-lying fields and sweeping away boats moored along the coast. Governor John Winthrop later wrote that the waters rose to a height that he had never seen before or since, until his death. For William and Joanna and their 6 children, who were then 12-year-old Rebecca, 10-year-old Susan, 7-year-old Edmund, 3-year-old Jacob, and 1-year-old Mary, the storm must have been absolutely terrifying. The newly built homes of the settlers shook under the strain of the gale. Families would have huddled together and praying aloud as the furious winds shrieked like voices around them. The sea claimed entire fishing fleets, leaving women without their husbands and children without their fathers. Very sad. So when morning finally broke, the destruction was staggering. Uprooted trees had lay across the fields, crops were flattened, and the shoreline itself looked absolutely different from the day before. Yet survival in the face of such power also carried a strange reassurance. The colony and the people in it certainly endured. So after that, because William's house was basically destroyed, he built a much more sturdy house that is located on present-day North Shore Avenue in Danvers, most likely at the junction of Adams Street. Their furnishings probably consisted of a chair, a stool, a trunk, straw beds, a frying pan, a gridiron, a couple of plates, bowls, and wooden spoons. It was in the new house where the final two town siblings were born, Joseph and Sarah. Oh, sorry, I forgot to show you that. That's the intersection where the towns first lived when they came over. That's Adams Street and North Shore Ave. And then over here is, this is a court document that tells us how old Joseph was born, so how old Joseph was when the court document was actually filed in 1660. So now we can date his birth back to being about 1639. And then we have another document from Samuel Parris's entry in his book, in the minister's book, with Sarah Town being born about 1641. So this one here is dated, this document is dated, I think, 1689. And it says that she's about 48 years old here. So again, if you do the math, she's born about 1641. So young Mary would have learned how to operate the day-to-day activities of the household, such as the cooking, the sewing, the weaving, spinning, using a cheese press and butter churn, eventually milking the cows and taking care of the chickens. As long as the activity was in the home or in her garden or by the barn, Mary would master each skill with precision to perfection. So here is the hearth in the homestead. It's absolutely gorgeous. I love the hearth. And then next is the, I think that's the cheese press, right, Sarah? Right, Candace? Yeah, thank you. This cheese press, and then we have the lovely spinning wheel that's over there. And then the garden. So one might wonder if Mary felt bittersweet when her sister, Rebbecca, went ahead and married Francis in the mid-1640s. 10-year-old Mary probably felt joy and yet longing for her sister when she moved out of the house to start her own family. But one might reflect as to the amount of times that Mary set foot on this property if she visited Rebbecca in later years, and the times that Rebbecca might have visited her in Topsfield. Since their other sister, Sarah Bridges, lived between the two sisters, but closer to Mary after Mary married Isaac Esty, and that court documents place Sarah's husband in the house of Isaac Esty, it's more likely that Mary and Sarah had more of an opportunity to visit each other. But it doesn't mean that the sisters didn't get together on special occasions from time to time. So here is where William and Joanna Town moved in 1652, and that's in Topsfield. It's on the corner of Salem Road, right across the street from the county, I can't say that, yes, thank you, the county co-op. And and that's where they lived. And the house would have been actually, from what I'm told from the Town Family Association, it would have been like right down towards the left, lower left of this picture. But the town of Topsfield maintains that land. And in fact, I saw them out there mowing this afternoon, and it looked really cool how they were doing it. So now this is, oh, actually, I'll backtrack a minute. Sorry. So eventually, as William and his sons were granted and purchased land neighboring their parents, the entire town and Estey families owned the whole length of the 7-mile drumlin from east to west, from what is now the Essex County Co-op and the Topsfield Fairgrounds, all the way into Beverly. So this here is the site of where Edmondtown lived, Maple Street and Perkins Row. And that's another view behind. And in fact, a fun fact about this, if you go around the back of this here, you're going to see a brook on the right-hand side. I don't know if any of you here are descendants of Sarah Wilde's, but that is the brook in the documents of the Salem witch hunt where it said that Mary Reddington was pulled down from her horse and she was blaming Sarah Wilde's specter of doing it. It happened right around that bend. I'm sorry? That's in Topsfield. That's on Maple Street. It's right where Amerigas is. So if you take that left down there and then you see it fork off, that's where it is. Thank you. And then there's I think, next one here is the site of where Jacob and Catherine Simonstown lived. And that is the corner of River Street, and I believe that is Hill Street at that point. And then next is Joseph and Phoebe Perkinstown on the corner of Garden Street and Hill Street. Yes, all in Topsfield. So what is not certain is whether or not Mary knew Isaac Estey while she was living in Salem or met him when they both lived in Topsfield. Isaac Estey, who was likely one of 2 children born to Geoffrey Estey and Mary Salmon, was baptized in November of 1627 in Freston, Suffolk, England. The Estey family appeared to have immigrated before September of 1639, when Jeff first appears in the New England court records in a suit against Mr. Richard Hollingworth. Jeff was an ordinary kind of a guy whose life surfaces in small but very telling details. In 1642, whoops, hold on, I knew this was going to happen to me at some point. All right. I'm so sorry. I hit the wrong button and away it goes, right? So at 1642, he was fined for falling asleep during church services. And later, Geoffrey was presented for failing to maintain fencing on land that was under his responsibility. And in 1645, for reasons that we don't know about, he paid 5 shillings to be excused from the militia training. Isaac may have felt his father's absence deeply when Geoffrey relocated first to Long Island and later to Huntington, New York, where he died in 1659. That loss may have weighed even more heavily on Isaac after he married Mary, beginning a family of his own without his father nearby. Isaac first appeared in the Essex County Court records at Salem in November of 1652, when he acknowledged a judgment to Edmund Batter. The record, however, does not specify where Isaac was living at the time. Since a marriage record for Isaac and Mary is not listed in the Salem Vital Records, one can assume that Isaac and Mary were married at Topsfield, but here's the issue. in Topsfield between 1650 and 1658. All those town records burned in a house fire. Thank you, John Reddington, who was the clerk at the time. And the records were all in his house, and his house just went up in flames. So all those records are lost, and therefore we don't know the marriage date, and we don't know exactly when Isaac Estey Jr. was born. What we do know is that following her marriage, Mary lived just across the street from her parents. And I'm sure that most of you that have lived in this area know that sign very well. And right behind that sign is the Essex County Co-op. And that's where Mary lived. And there it is. Her house would have been right up behind the yellow building over to the right-hand side. And next is the same, the same area, but just a little bit of a different view. Okay. The Estey home was most likely a 1.5-story house framed with heavy oak and clapboard walls. The roof was most likely shingles, and the thatch used on the earlier houses, as the thatch on the earlier houses were a fire hazard, so they got smart. The windows would have been small panes to conserve the heat, and part of the single bay would have been used as a birthing room adjacent to the kitchen, where Mary's babies most likely lived during their infancy. And there would have been the main hall with the main chimney. The chairs were hung and the furniture collapsed against the walls when not in use, which made room for all the spinning wheels and everything else to come out so that they could do their daily chores. Included in Mary's kitchen garden would have been herbs for food and wellness, such as most likely fennel flower, chamomile, white lilies, goat's rue, which was added to the ale to prevent from the plague. And then she probably would have had double feather fuel to help ease a fever if anybody was sick. Mary's work remained either in her house or in close parameters outside. She would not work the field, only enter her garden and the barn, and work consistently from the time she woke up to the time she went to bed. And then she would have taught her own daughters what she herself was taught by her mother. In Mary's house, there was no privacy. She would ensure that quiet conversation was the norm, and she taught her children to keep the peace amongst themselves so as not to cause disturbance, because she wouldn't want Isaac to become feeling any anxiety over any unnecessary noise. So the whole thing was to keep things calm for him. That's the way it worked back in those days. She was also in charge of her children's instruction of religion and reading. And if Mary had a servant, it was only because there was way too much to do. We don't know if Mary had a servant, but we certainly know that Isaac did. And we now know the name of Isaac's servant who actually took off on him. And that person was Mr. Joseph Williams. And I am going to be doing more research into him and to why he took off, because we just don't know. We just see it mentioned in a court record. But it would be really interesting to know why he took off, because that would add an element to the living situation within the Estey household. So I think that's very interesting. Isaac had a successful side hustle as a cooper and would have probably made the cider barrels, which you see outside, and sold them to men who shipped the cider back to England, that before he got married. Later, when he lived in Topsfield, Isaac probably would have made those cider barrels, tubs and churns for his family and his neighbors, and probably sold them to the neighbors for a profit to kind of help with the neighborhood economy. And a look into the ancient records of Topsfield tells us that Isaac made some other extra income when he was chosen to check the fences of the men who lived in town, making sure those fences were up to code. And he helped to pave the way for safe travel from Topsfield to Salem. and he served as a tithing man during service. He also served as a selectman and was on the commission to convince Parson Joseph Capon to minister at Topsfield. So he was busy about town when he wasn't tending his farm. His farming year began in March during the thaw, and then the spring planting would follow. In June, the grass would be cut probably with the machetes on the sides, followed by weeding and tending the crops. And then the second cutting of the grass would be in August. And then, of course, they would start gathering and preserving their crops for the winter. Both Mary and Isaac were full members of the church at Topsfield before 1684, and they were counted amongst the elect who received communion once a month. Mary, in particular, excuse me, was known for her very plain spoken nature, reminding others to mind their words. And later during her imprisonment, however, both the Salem and Ipswich jailkeepers described her as a model prisoner. And taken together, these accounts suggest that Mary faithfully conformed to expectations, but she also stood firmly in the truth as she understood that truth to be. Mary and Isaac experienced the same joys and sorrows as all families do. She would have probably assisted in the birth of the 11 of her 12 grandchildren born while she was alive. Sadly, her granddaughter, through her son John, who was also named Mary Estey, was baptized on July 31st, 1692. Well, you can guess where Mary was when that happened. One would suppose that the family delivered the news to her wherever it was that she was incarcerated. And probably it was Isaac or one of the boys who would have attended her while she was in jail. So how do we get from a woman who is totally accepted by her community to a woman who is accused of being in league with the devil? And what role did the Topsfield and Salem village boundary dispute play into the accusations against Mary? So let me answer that first question first. The dispute that you often hear about that has been claimed to have something to do with the Salem Witch Trials between the bounds of Salem Village and Topsfield was not an issue for two reasons. Number one, it's not mentioned in any of the court documents of 1692. And it was a different Putnam member who actually lived in that area where that dispute came about. And that was Captain John Putnam. He didn't sit on any of the committees that ran the boundary lines year after year. But he also had a very good reason to believe that that land was his, and here's why. And let's see here. This is where he lived, actually. According to family tradition, John Putnam Sr. immigrated with his family from Aston Abbots, England, sometime between 1627 and 1634. By 1640, the selectmen of Salem granted him and his brother, Thomas Sr., 155 acres of land. And John's portion, John Sr.'s portion, Captain John's father, included 100 acres in the northwest part of the settlement, then, which was a wilderness, distant from the Salem town's meeting house and without roads. Thomas received 50 acres, while the remaining 5 acres were considered to be meadowland. The town's reasoning seems clear. Salem needed strong farmers to provide food for the community, and John Sr. was such a man. He probably was standing on his newly granted land, and we can only imagine that he was impressed by the natural beauty of all the wooded area around him, but then probably had experienced some type of urgency because he didn't have a house. And he didn't have any of the outbuildings or anything, so he had to get things moving pretty fast. And So yet the selectmen warned him before he started building his house that boundary errors and overlapping claims were possible. And boy, that warning would definitely prove prophetic. By 1643, Recorder Increase Norwell mistakenly entered the original 1639 order that John Sr. had received, as if Salem villagers alone had right to the area. They didn't include all of the people that were already living there as part of Ipswich and New Meadows, which was later known as Topsfield. So this clerical error sparked disputes that lasted over 60 years and included the Estey and the Town families against this particular Putnam family, but not Thomas Putnam Jr.'s family. At John Sr.'s death, his holdings had grown to 800 acres and divided it amongst his 3 sons. And the youngest, Captain John Putnam, inherited the land stretching 2.5 miles from his present-day Ledgewood Street in Danvers, right there, to the Topsfield line near Hill Street and Rowley Bridge Road, today part of the Donna Bristle Reservation. Walking these woods now, which I've actually done, it is still incredible beauty, those trails there. It's awesome. But you also have to understand, too, that I could understand that it would have been hard to understand where the boundary lines were back then, because they didn't have like the land surveys like they have today. They were marking from piles of stone to certain trees. Well, what if the tree fell? What if the stones were, disrupted or whatever? It would become unclear. So committees redrew and reran boundary lines repeatedly, sometimes with Captain John's own brothers, Thomas Sr. and Nathaniel, acknowledging Topsfield's claim. So those 2 guys were against his Captain John. And then the Putnams also, So they did for a while, but then they came back and they again sided with Captain John. And then the Putnams also were refusing to pay taxes towards the Topsfield meeting house, because again, Topsfield believed that the Putnams were actually in Topsfield when the Putnams were actually part of Salem Village. So tensions escalated in 1680 when Topsfield appointed Mr. Thomas Baker, Jacob Town, and John Howe to clarify property lines and prosecute encroachments. Well, guess who was cited? That would have been Captain John. So we're going to fast forward 7 years. And I'm going to go now to the beautiful, where'd it go? Oh, I missed it. Oh, I don't have it. Oh, I was going to show you the Donna Bristle Trail. Oh, well, I think that might be coming up later as well. So picture it. The woods in 1687, the Town and Estey men, Isaac Estey Sr. and Jr., their grandnephew Thomas Town, and their nephews John and Joseph Town, found Captain John and several of his kin felling trees near the disputed border. Both families claimed that land as their own. Axes were in hands. And tempers flared, and a heated argument broke out. Captain John, who was never one to shy away from a confrontation, even threatened violence when he was challenged, and especially in this case, he was challenging them. A fight could have easily erupted, yet the cooler heads prevailed. The Estey and townmen, still seething, finally declared, "If you don't stop cutting down those dang trees, we'll see you in court." And John's temper and his combativeness, honed through service in King Philip's War and even through running local wrestling rings, where he was once shot in the face, were legendary. So though initially the court sided with John in this case, the decision was quickly overturned. And finally, in 1703, a joint committee from Topsfield and Salem settled the matter. but only by accepting the erroneous 1643 record. So that erroneous record are the actual Topsfield boundary lines today. Decades of feud had stemmed from one man's mistake. But Captain John, he believed in the invisible world and the reality of witchcraft. He was one of 12 men who signed the statement attributing Daniel Wilkins' death in 1692 to unnatural causes. Yet when called to testify in actual depositions, his words reveal a striking restraint. When Reverend George Burroughs lived with Captain John for about a month, tensions within the household soon surfaced between George and his wife. Giving only eyewitness testimony in 1692, Captain John recalled only that Burroughs had been harsh with his wife, while she herself was nothing but a dutiful wife to him. At one point, John and his wife Rebbecca had been asked to mediate a disagreement between the couple when George pressed his wife to make a separate covenant promising to keep his secrets. And John and Rebbecca then at that meeting reminded George that such promises were already a part of their original marriage covenant, and therefore a second oath wasn't needed. So their role in this mediation, in this particular circumstance, steadied that situation. And again, when he deposed in 1692 regarding this situation, John Putnam made no mention of witchcraft regarding this situation, none. John was one of 8 Putnams who signed the petition in defense of Rebbecca Nurse. Interesting to note that Jonathan Putnam, his son, also signed this petition. And Mercy Lewis accused 2 people of bewitching him about a month after he signed this petition, described on the next document. The deposition depicting John against Rebbecca and Martha Carrier. So let me rephrase that. So the deposition, if you look at the records of the Salem witch hunt, where it says that Samuel Parris and Captain John Putnam versus Rebbecca Nurse and Martha Carrier is, in my opinion, quite deceiving. And that is because John's son, Jonathan, was sick at his home on June 18th, 1692, and Mercy Lewis was called into immediate, and Mercy could not speak as soon as she entered the house. She was asked to raise her hand if she saw any witches afflicting Jonathan. So she entered a trance, and then she raised her hand. But after recovering, she named Rebbecca Nurse and Martha Carrier as holding Jonathan's head. Now again, that's Captain John's son. Notably, Captain John, and in this case, Reverend Samuel Parris, did not accuse anyone of witchcraft themselves. They testified only as eyewitnesses to Mercy's behavior and what they observed during Jonathan's illness. Their testimony provided the court with documentation of the events of that particular day. He, Captain John, did not affirm Mercy's accusation. And then soon later, he defended Rebbecca Nurse in court again. Rebbecca had been accused of bewitching John's sick daughter and son-in-law, who both sadly died. And John testified that they had died of malignant fever and that he or his wife had never any reason to believe that they were bewitched by Rebbecca Nurse's specter. All of this evidence suggests that Captain John did not use the witch trials to pursue any personal vendettas. His restraint distinguished him from others, especially in some of those Putnams, proving once and for all that the Topsfield boundary dispute had zero to do with the witchcraft accusations. So you're probably wondering, why was Mary accused? Well, Mary's sisters, Rebbecca and Sarah, were already in jail for the same crime, which increased the likelihood that Mary would also be charged at some point. And 2, John Putnam Jr., who was Captain John's nephew and a cousin-in-law to Ann Putnam Sr., said that he heard gossip regarding Joannatown, Mary Estey's mother. Remember that it was believed that witchcraft could be passed from mother to daughter. Heather Wilkinson Rojo has said that there may have been an accusation against Joanna in England, but because those records are so sparse in England before they came over, I don't think anything has ever been found to clarify that point. However, there is a court case in Topsfield about 20 years before the Salem witch hunt that took place against the minister of Topsfield, who was accused not only of being drunk during service, but also drunk at a meal held at the parsonage later that day. And Joanna was there at both service and meal, and she was the only person to testify in the minister's defense. So, could the gossip of John Putnam Jr. Be heard? Was that it? I'll let you decide because I don't know for sure. But that's the only thing that I can see where that might have been the reason why John Putnam Jr. heard something. Maybe that was it. We don't know, but I'll let you decide. But sure enough, the warrant for Mary's arrest was issued or sworn out on April 21st, 1692, and her chief accusers were Ann Putnam Jr., Mercy Lewis, and Mary Walcott. And I think I've been forgetting to, oh, nope, I haven't. There it is. There's the lovely Ingersoll's Tavern. Needs a lot of work, as you can see. She would have been brought to Nathaniel Ingersoll's Tavern until it was her turn for her pretrial examination, when she would have walked down the street to the meeting house. The meeting house would have been packed on the inside, and actually, you're sitting in the meeting house as a lot of it looked back in 1692. This meeting house was built in the mid-1980s for the Three Sovereigns for Sarah, and it was built to specification. So if somebody from 1692 was walking in that door, they would recognize this as their meeting house. We would have had the packed meeting house. She would have had people outside lining the windows, making it extremely dark, even if it was a sunny day. That's how many people were like so interested in what was going on. The atmosphere inside would have been incredibly noisy and disruptive, with her accusers sitting only feet away. So think about it. Here's where the bar is. There's where her accusers are. And if everybody was like being really noisy and like, oh my gosh, blah, blah, screaming or whatever, that could have been very disruptive for her. It would have had a hard time to understand what was being said. And don't forget too, there probably were people up in the balconies over here. So, I mean, it would have been ultimate chaos while they were being questioned. But Mary stood firm against the accusations thrown at her through the magistrates, tried to bully her into a confession with these leading questions. What do you say? Are you guilty? And what have you done to these children? To which Mary replied, and I quote, I can say before Christ Jesus, I am free. I know nothing. The magistrates then asked her, how can you say that? You see they are tormented and accuse you. You know nothing? Then Mary did something kind of interesting. She actually turned the tables on the magistrates and she questioned them. And she said, would you have me accuse myself? And they replied, yes, if you're guilty. Then they continued to badger her. How far have you complied with Satan and whereby he takes this advantage against you? And Mary replied, sir, I have never complied, but prayed against him all my days. I have no compliance with Satan in this. What would you have me do? Again, she keeps turning the tables on the magistrates. Love it. They repeat, confess if you be guilty. And Mary doesn't waver. I will say it if it was my last time. I am clear. After Mary's pretrial examination was done, she was taken to the Salem jail and stayed there until possibly May 13th, when she may have been transferred to Boston. And we say this because Margot Burns, the historian that I thanked earlier, she is part of the group that actually looked at all the documents in the original script all around the country and noted that in the minimus for May 13th, that there is a corner of that document that is missing. She also noticed that all of the people that were arrested on April 21st, or most of them, were transferred to the Boston jail. And she believes that Mary Estey's name was actually in the corner part that was torn off. So that's why we believe that she was actually transferred along with them. So here is a picture of where the Salem jail stood. Well, actually the Salem jail was more towards the right. It was actually underneath the street that's next to it. But that's where it was. And now we have a second. The plaque that actually stands on the building at 10 Federal Street. And then the next one is where the Boston jail stood. So who offered depositions against Mary and why? In those days, people often felt the need to explain their misfortunes by finding a cause. And accusations of witchcraft provided some very ready answers. Some of the depositions from 1692 almost read like sudden aha moments. One example comes from 19-year-old Samuel Smith. In 1687, after leaving the Easty home, he passed a stone wall that suddenly shook very violently, and it really frightened him. So he didn't think anything of it until Mary's, accused. And then he gave testimony against Mary, and he then recalled that she had reprimanded him for speaking rudely during a visit to her and Isaac's home, and she warned him that he would regret his words. So now he's blaming this, well, not really blaming, he doesn't say it specifically, but he does allude to the fact that this accusation against her had something to do with him being frightened by the stone shaking on the wall. That was Samuel Smith. And then another more damning accusation came from 70-year-old Margaret Reddington. In 1689, while visiting the Esty home, she spoke with Mary about an illness that left her feeling solemn. That same afternoon, her condition grew worse. And later that night, Margaret claimed that Mary's specter appeared to her, offering her a piece of meat. And Margaret refused the meat, saying that it was, and I quote, not fit for a dog, after which the specter, Mary's specter, vanished. This reflects how ordinary ailments or mood changes could quickly become evidence once fear of bewitchment took hold. Then something miraculous happened that would probably give the Estey, nurse, and town families reason for hope. Mary Estey was re-examined after 3 of the 4 afflicted girls expressed doubts about the accusations against her. And she was released from jail. She went back to her family. Here is where she went. That is now, that's the actual, so where the house, where Isaac Estey Jr.'s house was. That is not the house, but there's one cornerstone under that house, which is on Route 1 on Boston Street, where it's called the Evermore now. The Evermore, Witch Hill at Pierce Farm, something like that, yeah. But there's one stone in there that's original from Isaac Estey Jr.'s house. But there's a picture of that coming up. But they were relieved. But why wouldn't she have gone home to her husband? One could surmise that Isaac Sr., who was getting a little bit elderly at that time, may not have been able to adequately nurse Mary back to health. And since Isaac Jr. and only his wife, Abigail, and their one child were at their house, an infant child, they may have been the best choice to care for her until she could return to her own home. Sadly, that didn't happen. On May 20th, the home of John and Hannah Putnam Jr. was crowded with visitors. Their servant, Mercy Lewis, was violently ill in both mind and body. Samuel Abbey stopped by to see what was happening and found Mercy bedridden and unable to speak. Since John Putnam was away, Hannah asked Samuel to go fetch Ann Putnam Jr. to identify the specter that was tormenting Mercy, choking her and threatening her with a winding sheet if she refused to sign the devil's book. Samuel returned with Anne, Abigail Williams, and Sarah Trask, who was just along for the ride that day. Anne and Abigail identified the specter as the woman who was sent home the other day. They claimed that Mary Estey, along with two other specters, were assaulting Mercy as she lay speechless. But then Mercy rallied, crying out to God not to let the specters kill her, and declared that Mary's specter would murder her by midnight. Both Mercy and Elizabeth remained certain that Mary was to blame for their fits, and later that same day, Mary Walcott comes in as part of the visit and reported that Mary's specter threatened to kill Mercy by midnight if she could. So here they are, they're all saying that Mary's gonna come and kill her. A further cause for alarm, or Mary's specter was gonna come and kill her. A further cause for alarm was that Mary was no longer shackled in irons during those 2 days. And the belief at the time was that without the shackles, she could authorize the devil to release her specter to do bodily harm. So around 8 p.m., Constable John Putnam Jr., again, Captain John's nephew, returned home with Marshal George Herrick and Benjamin Hutchinson. Seeing Mercy's condition and believing that she truly was going to be dead by midnight, whether from a genuine illness or a conversion disorder, they decided that action was urgent and the rush to apprehend Mary was on. Though John and Benjamin's travels for the next 3 hours are not recorded, George Herrick's travels are. And it's possible that they may have all traveled together. Anyhow, it's most likely that John Putnam Jr. and Benjamin traveled 5 miles south to John Hathorne's house to get the arrest warrant. Once it was received into his hands, Herrick would have had to travel 8 miles to Isaac Estey Jr.'s house. With or without Benjamin, it's not clear. But Isaac Jr. probably saw Herrick approach the house, gathered Mary swiftly, and brought her downstairs into the basement, which was a small root cellar at the time. Where she crouched in a fetal position by the cornerstone, probably gripped by crippling fear. She probably heard a heated exchange between Isaac Jr. and George Herrick, trying to hold back any noise or whimper that would give her whereabouts away. The weight of anxiety on her entire body became all too suffocating as the sounds of his footsteps grew closer. Mary was in no doubt in fear for her life. And sadly, there was no escape for her when she was found huddled in that corner. With the knowledge of what was to come, Mary was hastily loaded onto the cart to experience the ride of her life before being delivered 9 miles down the road to Salem for her second examination. That must have been harrowing for Mary, who was most likely placed in shackles at this time so that her specter would not escape. The men testified that they had returned to John Putnam Jr.'s house by midnight, only to discover that Mercy was still not feeling well. In fact, she never started to recover until the next morning when she fell asleep. So that's where Mary went, we believe, for her second pretrial examination. But since those records of that second pretrial examination don't exist, one could surmise that Mary was interrogated, this time at Beadle's Tavern. Mary was sent to the Boston jail on May 23rd. And on May 25th, Rebbecca Nurse and Sarah Cloyce were also transferred to the Boston jail. This would be the last time that all three sisters were together and hopefully found comfort with each other. And again, there's another view of where the Boston jail stood. While Mary was in jail, her sister-in-law, Mary Town, who was the wife of Edmund Town, was summoned to appear in court with all of her children on September 7th. They don't show up. Mary Town issued a statement the following day that the entire family was too sick to appear in court. At this time, her daughter Rebbecca was continually falling down for no apparent reason. Then the second summons was issued only for Mary and her daughter Rebbecca to appear. The return for the summons doesn't exist. One might assume that Mary doesn't show up again because she knows that her daughter is about to accuse her sister-in-law, Mary Estey, of being a witch. The fact that they don't show up for Mary's trial doesn't save Mary's life, but it does help to delay the process for Sarah Cloyce's trial, and it saved Sarah's life. If there was not a delay, it most likely would be that Sarah Cloyce would have hanged 333 years ago today. And you see the indictments against Sarah, which involved her niece, were handed down only in January of 1693, after the Superior Court of Judicature was set up. All of Sarah's indictments were returned ignoramus, and she never stood trial, and most likely because of that delay, because Mary told her daughter, no, we're not going, that's it. On September 9th, Mary and Sarah offered 3 suggestions to the magistrates as part of their petition. Judges should offer legal advice to the accused who did not have legal representation. Testimony should be heard from the accused's family, neighbors, and religious leaders, and balance the testimony of the afflicted with legal evidence. All of these things they were not doing, but that's what these two sisters suggested to them. Furthermore, Mary's solo petition to the court, which was composed to save others from being hanged, suggested that the magistrates examine the afflicted separately and try some of the people who confessed. She was confident that some of those confessors disguised the fact that they had nothing to do with witchcraft. Then came the fateful day, 333 years ago, via the Julian calendar. 8 victims were taken to Proctor's Ledge to be hanged. They crossed the causeway over the North River and ascended the steep path, but the ox cart carrying the condemned became stuck. Men struggled to free the wheels, while the accusers claimed they saw the devil holding them back. Eventually, the oxen heaved the cart forward, carrying the prisoners up the hill to the place of execution. And many wept as Mary bid farewell to her beloved husband and children, knowing what awaited them before all 8 were strangled by the rope. That's at the top of the memorial. If those of you that have seen the memorial want to know how to get up to the top and view overlooking the ledge on public property, let me know. I'll tell you how to get up there. It's I don't know Salem that well. I know it's behind Walgreens.
Walgreens.
Beginning in 1703, family members, including Isaac Estey Sr. and Jr. and Mary's daughter, Sarah Gill, began petitioning to restore the family's name, followed by a similar petition in 1709 signed by Isaac Estey, John Nurse, and others. In his petition to the General Court, Isaac Sr. detailed both the financial and personal cost of Mary's 1692 imprisonment. He spent 20 pounds on travel and provisions. He traveled twice a week for 5 months to care for her while she was held in 3 different jails: Salem, which a round trip mile would have been 14, and Boston jail, which is a 44-mile round trip, and Ipswich was a 14-mile round trip. Beyond the expense, he lamented the heartbreak of being separated from her, writing that no worldly compensation could ease his sorrow. His relentless efforts underscored the depth of his devotion and mirrored by Mary's steadfast dedication as his wife. Though Isaac's exact death date is not known, it is most likely that he passed away before the reversal of attainder for Mary, which is dated October 17th, 1711. And we know this because Jacob Estey is the subscriber for the Estey family. They were awarded the 20 pounds, and it was equally divided amongst the surviving children, who were Isaac Jr., Joseph, Benjamin, Jacob, Joshua, Sarah Gill, and Hannah Abbott. And shortly before her death on September 22nd, Mary, who had no legal counsel, and as a woman of her time was considered socially less than and largely without the right to petition, she took an extraordinary step of composing a petition on behalf of others, despite knowing her own fate. These are her words that she addressed to the magistrates. To the honorable judge and bench now sitting in judicature in Salem, and the reverend ministers, humbly sheweth that whereas your humble poor petitioner, being condemned to die, doth humbly beg of you to take it into your judicious and pious consideration that your poor and humble petitioner, knowing my own innocency, bless the Lord for it, and seeing plainly the wiles and subtlety of my accusers by myself, cannot but judge charitably of others that are going the same way with myself, if the Lord step not mightily in. I was confined a whole month on the same account that I am now condemned for, and then cleared by the afflicted persons, as some of your honors know. And in 2 days' time I was cried out upon by them, and have been confined, and am now condemned to die. The Lord above knows my innocency, then and likewise doth now, as the great day will be known to men and angels. I petition to your honors, not for my own life, for I know I must die, and my appointed time is set. But the Lord, he knows it is, if it be possible, that no more innocent blood be shed, which undoubtedly cannot be avoided in the way and course you go in. I question not, but your honors do to the utmost of your powers in the discovery and detecting of witchcraft and witches, and would not be guilty of innocent blood for the world. But by my own innocency, I know you are in the wrong way. The Lord in his infinite mercy direct you in his great work. If it be his blessed will that innocent blood be not shed, I would humbly beg of you that your honors would be pleased to examine some of those confessing witches. I, being confident that there are several of them, have belied themselves on others, as will appear, if not in this world, I am sure in the world to come, whither I am going. And I question not but yourselves will see an alteration in these things. They say myself and others have made a league with the devil. We cannot confess. I know, and the Lord, he knows, they belie me. And so I question not, but they do others. The Lord alone, who is the searcher of all hearts, knows that I shall answer it at the tribunal seat, that I know not the least thing of witchcraft. Therefore I cannot, I durst not belie my own soul. I beg your honors not to deny this my humble petition for a poor dying innocent person, and I question not but the Lord will give a blessing to your endeavors.
Is that by our own hand or was that dictated?
I'm not sure. We don't know that for sure, but those are her words.
How old were the sisters when they?
So Rebecca was 71, Sarah was in her early 50s, and Mary was 57. So here's another view of Proctor's Ledge. This is the view that has the names of the 8 that were hanged today, or the anniversary of their hanging. So before I go on, I'd like to take a moment of silence to remember the 8 who were hanged today, this day. Martha Corey, Alice Parker, Mary Parker, Ann Pudiator, Wilmot Red, Margaret Scott, Samuel Wardwell, and Mary Estey. Thank you all. Does anybody have any other questions? Sure. That is in Danvers. It's right around the corner from here, in fact. It's on the, yes, it is. For now. Yeah. Do you have any information on that?
On the status of the
Yes.
It's the town of Danvers took the current owner to court because he seemed to be neglecting the home. It's in very bad disrepair, as some people may have seen it know. It has now gone into receivership, and they've begun the process of assessing what work needs to be done to it. And hopefully that'll be done soon. They're still kind of assessing what it needs and how much work.
Does receivership mean that the town will go in?
No, a receiver was appointed by the courts. So Danvers initiated this act, but they will not have ownership of it. They're not taking ownership of it.
Can they force him to?
Yep.
There is
Okay.
a receiver that's been appointed by a court, and that person will oversee what repairs need to be done and coordinate with the courts.
One of the people who lives where I live in Danvers, was working on that, and he said that they had taken over receivership, but that's a good thing and a bad thing, because they don't have to necessarily let people back into it, they just have to make it up to code, and it could become private, as long as they, but if the town of Danvers per se isn't gonna take it over, and they don't necessarily have to make it, historic or let anybody into it.
Right. Yeah, the whole purpose of it is to make the home habitable again. So exactly what its future will be, it's still.
I guess the guy was a hoarder who owned it, and he wasn't keeping things up to par and taking care of it. He just owned it, he was not taking care property, and we need to take care of the empty property, so we call it.
Thank you. It's on the corner of Center Street and Hobart Street. Hobart and Center Street. Yeah. Are there any other questions? Yes.
Are you saying that the actual place where the hangings took place is that location behind Walgreens?
Yes. Well, so that's the memorial is in the area of where the hangings took place.
But the hangings themselves, they were on a hill, were they not?
Yes, they were.
And so that's the Walgreens, did you say on Boston Street?
Yes. It's going out towards Peabody.
As there's a hill behind where currently there's a Walgreens on Boston Street. That hill though is kind of a shadow of its former self. So the memorial that Mary has a picture of is located on the kind of a close approximation of where we think the executions were. But to be honest, because the hill doesn't look anything like it did in 1692, it's hard to say exactly where in relation to that they were. But probably somewhere very close to this, or maybe a little up the hill from here.
Yeah.
Not right on the street, but set back.
Maybe Candace can help you with this, but I think they had done some DNA samples. I think Emerson did some DNA samples.
Not DNA samples, they did some ground penetrating radar, but they really weren't able to conclusively use that to say if this was the location or not. They did it to see if there were any signs, but to be honest, the records actually aren't even clear on whether they used a tree at the site or if they built a gallows. So they did ground penetrating radar to see if there were any signs there, but it was inconclusive. They really couldn't determine anything from that.
It's interesting. Where were they buried? Where were the bodies buried after that?
Can I take that? So the bodies they're finding based on what happened. So because they couldn't have Christian burials because of their being condemned of that felony of witchcraft, they were not allowed those. They couldn't be like buried by the church or anything. So but a lot of times, even back in those days, people were buried on their farms. So we know that, or we believe that what happened was Rebecca's family, some of her men, probably went down to the proctors, or the ledge, and in the tree crevice, retrieved her remains, came up the Crane River right around here, and probably buried her right in the corner lot of, where the boundary line is on the farm. So we don't know where everybody else is buried. They have a feeling that John Proctor is buried behind Peabody High School. In that area, again, it's by a body of water that would allow them to transport the body up the river in a boat and in a corner lot on the farm. John Willard, I don't remember where they think that he's buried, but it's somewhere by Middleton. But again, and I went out and I searched for it, and this is based on research that Salem Witch Museum has done, and they do exquisite research on this. I went out, again, I forget where it is, I apologize, but I looked again, corner lot of what would have been Willard's farm, and there's a body of water. Sarah Wilde's descendant right here. Woo. And searching very hard for where she is most likely buried. And there's two places where it's possibly. I am encouraging people, please do not go to the first one until we actually figure this out. But the first one could be behind the Country Motors in Topsfield, because I've seen the boundary lines of her map, and I've seen where all the stone walls were. Those stone walls are all visible. It's again by the Ipswich River, which flowed a little bit differently at that time. So she could have been brought up the Ipswich River. They would have taken a right on Mile Brook, which went right through the Averill property, and they could have deposited her or buried her right there, where behind the Country Motors is. And the owner does realize that he could be living and running his business on a very historic property, and he's very excited about the findings so far. But yours truly found another portion of the Wilds map where Hasaki Meadow is actually closer to the river, to the Ipswich River. And I will not be able to do any more research until that meadow is all cleared out to see if any stone walls are in there. But it's by a body of water. They tell me there are stone walls out there. I don't know 100% for sure. But again, it's the second area where she could be buried.
What was the point? Did someone say that the DNA samples of Gallows?
No, there were no DNA samples. No, it was ground penetrating radar. Yes.
The Gallows or this outside of.
To see if there was any disturbance in the soil for the, to see if there was actually a gallows or if they were hanged by a tree.
As far as I know,
Yeah.
I'm not 100% certain exactly what they were looking for, but that, as far as I know, that's.
When you say it was a shadow of itself, meaning the hill was much higher or it was more filled in? What do you mean by shadow of itself?
A lot of it, from what I've been told, was pulled away, and a lot of Salem has been filled in and used to be water, and that was among some of the areas that they used for fill over the years.
You need to take some of them. When you stand on top of it and you look down towards the monument, there is this ditch or indentation, and my understanding was after they hung, they just rolled the bodies into the ditch.
Yes.
Families would come in night
Yes.
or at twilight and take the bodies away.
So we don't know exactly where on the hill the executions were or exactly where the bodies were. Many of the descriptions varied and didn't coordinate with one another. They conflicted a little bit. But there were some descriptions of it being so rocky that they used natural crevices and then put the bodies in the crevices and then covered them over. But where exactly that was on the hill, we can't say. It's speculation.
But there would be no more bodies there.
There have never been any found,
Everybody.
and it's quite a developed residential area for the most part. So it's hard to say if there would be anything.
And what about people like Woody Glover who had no family? What would happen to her body?
That I don't know.
It's possible that some bodies were left unclaimed. There were stories, but never any evidence or confirmation of this, that perhaps someone might have removed the unclaimed bodies to give them a more proper burial, but that's completely unknown. And again, it would be speculation.
I think somebody over here had a question. Yes, in 1692, yes.
And that's a total comment?
There were 19 that were hanged, and then one was pressed to death. But he was pressed to death closer to where the Salem jail was, in a field.
Are all of the names of the 19?
Yes, yes. Yep, let me show you, go back again.
So Mary, who wrote that petition, I mean, listening to it, she sounds incredibly articulate, intelligent, and well-spoken. And was that common for a woman her age in Topsfield to be that seemingly educated? It seems so above and beyond what you would think as far
Mhm.
as schooling for women, let alone being able to articulate a petition like that. Was that unusual at the time?
I want to say 50-50.
So the Puritans did highly encourage literacy,
But not with women.
including women, because of their faith. They wanted all of their congregants to be able to read the Bible, interpret the Bible, and be able to practice their faith. Outside of that, probably not much. But they considered it very important that people be able to read the Bible and be able to use that to practice it.
Oh, I didn't know. that.
Massachusetts had actually passed a law, a Puritan-based law, that required all children in Massachusetts to be taught to read and write in 1642. It wasn't, I don't know how much they were enforcing it. And women wouldn't have had formal education, but like Mary mentioned earlier, usually at home you would teach your children to read and write. So if the parents were literate, they would teach their children to read.
It was an incredibly well put together petition.
It is. And the other example I'm thinking of too is Sarah Wild's son, Ephraim Wild's. He had a notebook that's actually, it's not published anywhere online. It's out over at the Phillips Library Reading Room. But he was a very well-spoken young man. And in the court documents in 1692, he attributes his education to his mother. So, yeah. No, that she taught me well in the Christian tradition or Christian religion. And that would have been part of it because she would have had to teach him how to read the Bible and everything. But his notebook is incredible. And you can see like he's writing about Mars and the planets and everything else. I'm like, he was only 27 years old at that time.
Did they address the petition? What was done with the petition after it was submitted?
After her, it was lost. That's what I heard.
Nobody ever, no magistrates, no one ever addressed it or did anything
Nope.
with the petition?
Nope. That's what I understand. But look at that. I mean, just in the face of everything, she had the courage to stand up and write that to the magistrates, being a woman who was supposed to, not really be heard or for lack of a better term, but she did. She wasn't afraid to stand up, and not for herself, but for everybody else, to save other people.
But you said it was lost, but we have a picture of it?
Well, it got lost amongst the magistrates. So the petition exists, but they just, they didn't pay attention to it. Right.
There's a lot going on.
Yeah, there was a lot going on. Are there any other questions? Well, thank you very much, everybody. Thank you. Thank you so much. Thank you very, very much. Please take some flowers home. I've got a ton of them. Candace? Mary Bingham. I'm sorry. Thank you. Yes.
You said you're related to Sarah Wiles and Mary Estey.
And Susanna Martin, too.
And Susanna.
Oh, my gosh. I know. I got 3 of them.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. Thank you. And my feet were killing me. I had to take my shoes off at the end.
Oh.
Thank you so much, everybody, for coming. Thank you. Thank you so much. Thank you.
I'm gonna go look for that behind Walgreens, right?
Behind Walgreens, yes. So it's actually, if you go up Proctor Street, are you going tonight by chance?
No.
Okay. So if you're coming from Peabody and you're traveling on 107 South, you want to head into Salem, and it's just after you head into Salem, and it's on Proctor Street. So if you take the right on Proctor Street, you go up and around, and then there's the playground up there. You can park at the playground, and then you can walk down, and then the memorial is down, but closer to Boston Street on the left.
Okay.
But there is a way to get up to the top of the hill. So if you come back up, after you look at the memorial, come back up Pope Street. Then you'll take a right.
P-O-P-E?
Yeah, then you take a right and just follow that line. And then you're going to come to like a wooded area, and it says no entry after dusk. And just stay right in the leaf-filled area, and you'll be right in the area where they think they were hanged.
Okay.
Yeah.
You did a great job.
Thank you so
You're
much.
welcome.
Yeah, for anyone who's looking for the site, the Walgreens closed last month, so now it's just an empty storefront on the corner.
Oh, I
They
didn't
even
know
took
that.
down like the corner sign. I don't know what it's supposed to be next.
Thank you so much. Thank you for that.
There's just an auto shop next door, but I mean, it does look like the skeleton of
If
the
you
Walgreens. But
do you have a GPS?
Yes.
So it's right on the GPS, just type in Proctor's Legend Memorial and you'll see it. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you
And I
so
think
much.
I'm going to drop them off at Margaret Scott's house in Brown.
Oh,
On
beautiful.
the way home.
Thank you very much. Thank you.
So- You put on the GPS.
Proctor's Legend Memorial.
and
Yep.
Memorial, and you get to that stone
Yes.
memorial.
Yes.
And the hill itself is behind that?
Yes, it is.
Okay.
Yeah.
And what did you say about Pope Street?
So that's the name of the street that the memorial is on.
Oh, okay.
But you have to go up Proctor Street and go around,
Uh-huh,
because Pope Street, you can't take a right or a left
Okay.
on. It's a one-way.
okay.
Thank you very much, everybody. Thank you. Thank you. Please thank you. Take some flowers. Oh, baby.
Let's people get back to me, and I know how we're actually getting to a hotel and actually airport, so I don't know, especially with what's going on in the world today.
Oh, no kidding.
I mean, you don't know, what happened, with Marshall over there? That was a
Oh my goodness, I still can't believe that.
Yes, and